Is Ashley Benefield's gonna get a new trial? Team Defense seems to believe so. Hello, 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 and welcome to Alexa's Room, where we are not lawyers, we are not medical professionals, we are not law enforcement, we are just people. People who have opinions about all things going on in the true crime community, including what is going on with the Ashley Benefield case. Now, last we left off in the Ashley Benefield series. Ashley Benefield is the former Florida ballerina who was recently convicted of manslaughter for the unaliving of her late husband, Douglas Benefield, in an act of what she claims is self defense. Now, she was originally charged with both second degree murder as well as voluntary manslaughter. She was ultimately convicted on the manslaughter charge, but now her defense team is clapping back hard with 4 new motions that they recently filed right within that 10-day window of when they could do so. So last video, we went over that email that was sent to Judge White of that mysterious man named Adam who claimed that he was conversing with Ashley Benefield via Facebook Messenger between the years of 2018 to 2019, where she was apparently seeking a hitman to place a hit on Doug Benefield. That was court documented. It was sent to Judge White from this mysterious man named Adam, and then was shared with the prosecution as well as the defense. So that is documented. That's why we reported on it. Whether or not there is validity to it, and whether or not the prosecution is going to respond or follow up with that claim, I have no idea, but that email was sent, I believe, sometime between August 1st and August 3rd, so a couple of days after her guilty verdict came in. We also went over the motion to interview jurors based on potential juror misconduct. So if you want to check out that video, it's about an hour long. We do a full deep dive of both those motions. You can go check it out. I'll link that video at the very end of this video. Spicy. I think the defense presents a pretty compelling case. What, if anything, to at least interview the jurors based on some of the allegations that were made in that motion? Because Neil Taylor, my friends, he got some receipts. So I don't know. But I wanted to dedicate this video by going through this motion. It's 26 pages long. This is just kind of the overall encompassing motion for a new trial. And what say you at the end of this if you think Ashley Benefield deserves to have a second shot at things? If you think that there is some validity in terms of the prosecutorial misconduct, the juror misconduct, if you think all of those things added up makes for a compelling case for the defense, what say you? Let me know in the comment section below. Before we dive in, though, if you like today's video, make sure you hit that subscribe button. Make sure you hit that notification bell so you don't miss the next video from me. And make sure you hit that like button because it tells the YouTube algorithm that this is important news. And I believe it is, because when it comes to matters of DV, this is something that is just grossly underreported. Not just this case, but a lot of DV cases. But yeah, this case too. I mean, pretty much after the trial, it's been crickets, and we got to keep Ashley's story alive and well. So if you could do me that favor and do Ashley that favor by hitting the like button, make sure we reach as many people as possible with her story. All right, let's dive in. So motion for new trial, request for interview of trial jurors, and incorporated memorandum of law. Ashley C. Benefield's buy-in through undersigned counsel and pursuant to the 6th Amendment and the Due Process Clause of the 14th Amendment, the United States Constitution, and Article 1, Sections 9 and 16 of the Florida Constitution, as well as Rule yada 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 of the Florida Rules of Criminal Procedure, hereby moves this court for a new trial as grounds in support of the instant motion. Ms. Benefield alleges as follows. So first up is prosecutorial misconduct. Now, we got a lot to say in terms of the evil stepsisters, as some people like to call them. I like to call Rebecca Friel, or whatever her name is, Cruella DeVille. And then we got the Wish version of Regina George. Our mean girls of Manatee County. I have a lot to say about those two, and we'll probably pan back to some of their closing arguments, as well as the rebuttal. because that's where a lot of these claims come from, just so you can get a full picture. I did a full breakdown of their closing arguments, which I will also link at the top right corner if you want to go check that out. I'm not going to go through the whole thing, but let's see what Neil Taylor, or on behalf of Ashley Benefield, is alleging here in terms of prosecutorial misconduct. The prosecutor's improper and inflammatory remarks during closing arguments, bing, 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 we have a winner here. Closing arguments prejudiced Miss Benefield's substantive rights, right? Substantive rights and warrant a new trial. A legal standard. Under Rule 3.600B of the Florida Rules of Criminal Procedure, the court shall grant a new trial if 5. The prosecutor was guilty of misconduct, or 8. For any other cause not due to the defendant's own fault, the defendant did not receive a fair and impartial trial. Rule 3.600B5 requires the court, so now it's breaking up what this rule means, requires the court grant a new trial where the prosecutor is guilty of misconduct that prejudiced the defendant's substantial rights. State versus Connell. Improper prosecutorial comments warrant a new trial where they deprive the defendant of a fair and impartial trial, materially contribute to the conviction, are so harmful or fundamentally tainted as to require a new trial, or are so inflammatory that they might have influenced the jury to reach a more severe verdict than it would have otherwise. Spencer versus State. So let's look up some of this case law now, because again, we're not lawyers here. We're lay people. This is the court of public opinion. We're not attorneys, so we have a full picture idea of what the defense's argument is going to be. Okay, so this is the case law. This is State versus Connell. So again, this is via the defense's motion for the new trial in this specific case. So the defendant's motion for a new trial alleged that he was prejudiced in the preparation of his defense by the state's failure to provide him with taped statements made at a deposition of the young victim and her sister. The trial court held a hearing to determine whether the state's noncompliance with the defendant's general discovery request was inadvertent or willful, and whether it resulted in harm or prejudice to the defendant. After receiving additional memoranda from counsel, the trial judge found that the state's failure to disclose these statements was inadvertent. Nevertheless, the court concluded that this omission prevented the defendant from receiving a fair and impartial trial and ordered a new trial. Interesting. That's why I like looking at case law, because it's like you learn just so much about how some of these different states operate. So that's the first case law they're quoting here. Improper prosecutorial comments or in a new trial where they deprive the defendant. We just read that. It would have otherwise. Spencer versus State. The defendant's substantive rights are prejudiced if there is a reasonable probability that, but for the remarks, the outcome would have been different. United States versus Wilson. So these are the false statements now. So they're kind of just laying the foreground here. They're saying, hey, according to this rule, we are claiming prosecutorial misconduct. Section B is why, and here's how. So now they're laying it out with these specific statements, which we're going to cut to a couple of the clips in a couple of seconds, just so we can see what they are exactly referring to. So false statements about Douglas Benefield filing for sole custody. That was a big thing too, because I remember my ears perked up when I heard that for the first time. I'm like, huh? Like, any one of those like moments, because I did not hear that mentioned once throughout the trial, not even from Miss Stephanie Murphy. And maybe I need to get my ears cleaned out. Maybe I missed that, and maybe you guys caught it, but I never heard that. And this is one of the things that they are leading this off with in regards to prosecutorial misconduct. So during closing arguments, Chief Homicide Prosecutor Suzanne O'Donnell falsely stated May 4th, only a few days later, after she files for another injunction, Doug files for sole custody of the child. Is this Ashley Benefield's biggest fear? That this man is going to get sole custody, but she's making all of these grand allegations against him that he knows are not true. There's got to be something wrong, and it's probably not safe for this child to even be with her. So he files for full custody. And that was always bizarre to me because it's like everybody wants to point the finger at Ashley and be like, she's the dangerous one. She's manipulative. I'm like, did she ever display any violent tendencies? Was there any documented history where she retaliated back? If there's evidence of that, why didn't that come into play? There was not one moment, not one shred, not one scintilla of evidence that came out through this trial. And I'm talking about this trial, folks. I'm not talking about the stand your ground hearing. I did not follow that. I won't play. But in this trial, I never once heard any evidence come forward that she was any type of aggressor whatsoever. But you know who had a documented history of violent behavior? Douglas Benefield was violent, was an aggressive man. He had violent tendencies. So I'm not understanding this claim here. How would it not be safe for the child to be around Ashley? She's not the one firing off firearms into the ceilings. She's not punching holes in walls. She's not threatening to unalive herself. So I'm just a little confused. And I was then when I was listening to this closing argument by Miss Suzanne O'Donnell, aka Wish version of Regina George. So this statement was entirely false and unsupported by any evidence presented at trial. In fact, the court docket shows that it was Ashley Benefield who filed a motion on May 4, not Douglas Benefield. Exhibit B. The prosecutor further emphasized this claim in her PowerPoint presentation, Exhibit C, displayed to the jury. So this is a screenshot. Doug finds out she's dating someone else. Doug files for divorce. Series of complaints start 5, no charges. It looks like 5/1/2020. Defendant files for another injunction. 5/4/2020. Doug files for sole custody, seeing multiple therapists, Forrest, Quintel. Defendant acts different in front of Doug. Social outings, beach, movies, restaurants, pool. 6/1/2020. Sent for eval with Dr. Broder, which she was allegedly afraid of what was going to come out in that report. And then remember, the prosecution shifted. They skirted, they yeeted from that being the motive behind her unaliving Douglas Benefield. So this is what they are referring to, and I just want to pull up this clip. Ooh, and it looks like they timestamped it. The defense is so good here. Hold on one second. All right, so let's watch Suzanne, Timu, Regina George, kick it back with this. So let's back it up a little bit.
And May 1st of 2020, the defendant, having failed in the criminal system, again, files for another injunction based on these allegations that fail in the criminal system. Do you see a pattern here? May 4th, only a few days later, after she files for another injunction, Doug files for sole custody of the child. This is Ashley Benefield's biggest fear, that this man is going to get sole custody. But she's making all of these grand allegations against him that he knows are not true. There's got to be something wrong, and it's probably not safe for this child to even be with her. So he files for full.
And like that again, that's the crazy thing to me, because it's like, what evidence have you shown to prove that the child would not be physically safe in the care of Ashley Benefield? She is not the one shooting firearms into the ceiling. She's not punching holes into walls or driving erratically. She's not doing any of that stuff. She's not talking about the warrior side of her, or how she would unalive random people on a cruise that she's on that are in her surrounding vicinity. So, I mean, I don't understand. That was like a big part for me. And I know that other people are going to pick apart this claim of Doug filing for sole custody, because that for me is the bigger issue of the two. That's the bigger claim. And the thing that made my ears perk up when she said this, because it never came out in testimony. Never came out, but here it is in closing arguments on your dumb PowerPoint. So she's lying. But not only that, she's lying about the safety of the child and trying to present Doug as this very paternal, um, sensitive, caring father, when half the time he was absent from Eva. I mean, where the heck was he all those weekends or all those weeks where he was driving up and down from South Carolina to Florida to stalk Ashley? Like, I don't know, man, but let's continue watching for a little bit.
Of the child. This is Ashley Benefield's biggest fear, that this man is going to get sole custody. But she's making all of these grand allegations against him that he knows are not true. There's got to be something wrong, and it's probably not safe for this child to even be with her. So he files for full custody. And what happens? All of a sudden, she sidles up
Like, do you know what happens?
to him, and now we're getting back together. And we start to go to marriage counseling, and we go see Dr. Forrest, who referred them to Dr. Quintel. And they're going to marriage counseling about how they're going to get together. And to Doug, she's saying, yes, I want to reconcile. Let's get back together. But behind his back to the doctor, she's like, no, I know how.
I mean, would you, if you were afraid of your abuser and your violent partner, would you be like confronting him and say, nah, I don't want any part? If you're afraid for your life and you know that the system is working against you in every capacity, that's my other favorite thing too, which we'll get to in a little bit when we get to the other evil stepsister. But I mean, this is absolutely insane to me. The amount of lies, just gaslighting at its finest, folks.
I'm not getting together with him. Then she goes on all these social outings with Doug and the child. Goes to the beach, goes to the movies, goes out to dinner, to lunch, swims at the pool in his apartment complex, giving Doug all of these mixed signals.
I mean, Panera Bread. Like, she went to Panera Bread. I'm fairly certain that's where the heads up game video was from. I think with her mom in a public setting. And yes, we heard about the pool, but the movie, I mean, I didn't hear anything about the movies or restaurant. She went to Panera Bread.
We're going to reconcile. We're going to get all this back together. And in the back of her mind, she knew all along. She was just waiting for an opportunity to strike. And then 6/1 of 2020, the system sends them for an evaluation with Dr. Broder. Like, what is going on here? Someone needs an evaluation. So they go to this evaluation with
I think you need an evaluation, but that's just my opinion.
Dr. Broder. And this deception on the part of Ashley Benefield continues. She does the same thing. We're going to reconcile. We're going to get back together. And then when she's not with him, she's saying that that's not true. And then towards the end of September.
I mean, it's like I could see, like, if she was telling like her girlfriends, like, one thing, like, oh, I'm gonna like suck him dry for everything that he's got. I want the house, I want his car, I want this, I want that. But Doug had no money. Doug had no money. And not for nothing, of course, she's going to feel vulnerable and comfortable to people who are being recommended by the court for them to see, because he made it very clear was that court ordered. It was recommended by the court, but they knew it was going to come up in this upcoming hearing. And why would she lie? Why would she lie? Of course, she's going to say whatever she can to Doug to make things seem copacetic until she can get out. So I don't think that's too far of a reach, in my opinion, but what say you? So this improper argument implied the state had information not presented at trial, suggesting Miss Benefield. So this goes back to that case law that we were just reading, where it quoted in the Connell versus or State versus Connell case law, where the prosecution was withholding sharing certain statements with the defense, and thus the reason why they were ultimately granted, it seems like, a new trial, because they weren't given everything. by the prosecution, suggesting Miss Benefield was going to lose custody of her child, the final motive put forward by the state. Such comments referring to matters outside the record are clearly improper. Which I think this is a compelling argument because, again, and the fact that they have this now, I tried to pull it up via here, and I just pulled up my own separate link via Court TV. So I don't know what link this particular one links to, but I imagine it's the same clip we just watched. They have the timestamps. So, and I think that's great. I think that's great. So Neil Taylor is bringing his receipts. Such comments referring to the matters outside the record are clearly improper. See Wheeler versus State. As held in Williamson versus State, a prosecutor may not refer to facts not in evidence, as it constitutes a form of unsworn testimony not subject to cross-examination. So there comes that impartial or unfair trial, because they don't have who's making these statements, who said he was filing for sole custody. The person who would have been that witness would have been Stephanie Murphy, no, his family law attorney, who he was working on the custody battle with. So she would have been the witness to cross, and this would have been huge if this was true. If this was true, why wouldn't the prosecution why wouldn't the prosecution include this in their direct examination of Stephanie Murphy? This would be great if you have evidence. How hard would it be to provide this? And just as easily as how easy would it be to confirm that this is true, it's just as easy to confirm it is not true. And again, the defense didn't have an opportunity to cross-examine whatever evidence, whatever witness was going to provide such evidence, which again, I would be inclined to believe it'd be Stephanie Murphy. Similarly, in Vaksek versus State, and Lane versus State, the appellate courts held that it was improper for a prosecutor to refer to testimony or items not in evidence. I think that's really, you couple that with the juror misconduct, that motion that we review, I feel like this is a good lead. I feel like this is a really strong argument for them. Given the highly prejudicial nature of this false claim about Mr. Benefield seeking sole custody, there is a reasonable probability it affected the outcome of the trial. Moreover, the improper comments deprived Ms. Benefield of a fair and impartial trial, materially contributing to the conviction, and were so harmful and fundamentally tainted as to require a new trial. Miss O'Donnell's statements exceeded all acceptable bounds of advocacy and deprived Miss Benefield of a fair and impartial trial. A new trial is warranted on this ground alone. C. Improper attacks on and belittling of Miss Benefield's character and identity. I mean, she was getting shots fired all around, no pun intended. The prosecutors repeatedly and improperly attacked Miss Benefield's character, calling her a manipulator at least 14 times during closing arguments, and claiming she was manipulating everyone, including the jury. Yep, remember that? They ridiculed her emotional testimony and accused her of lying without evidence. Such vituperative characterizations of a defendant are improper and prejudicial. Gore versus State. So he's got a lot of different case law in here, which is interesting because going through the responses from the DA's office in the Commonwealth versus Karen Reed, I felt like it was a lot more. So he just kept quoting a lot of the same case law, whereas like Neil Taylor here, I know different strokes for different folks, but they're pulling out a lot of different case law. So it's interesting. For example, prosecutor Suzanne O'Donnell told the jury, the defendant trying to say he was in a fighting stance, he lunged at me. That is just her once again trying to manipulate the system. And see down here too, right? They have another YouTube clip for them to look at. Don't you love YouTube, right? She's trying to manipulate you to believe that this was necessary. He was coming at me, but the physical evidence does not bear that out. It does not show that he was coming at her. and that she had to shoot him. So let's see if we can find this clip.
He slams the door open, and she
Here we
turns
go.
around, right? And she sees him standing there. When I asked her to get down and show me what he was doing, that was another one of those evasive talking. I don't know. He was in a fighter stance. I don't know what fighters do, but I know it's a fighter stance. Okay, well, show me. What do you mean a fighter stance? I don't know, kind of like this. Okay, well, what are his hands doing? Just kind of moving around. Okay, so his hands are kind of moving around, and it didn't look a lot like a fighter stance. And then she said, I'm standing there with the gun pointed at him, and he lunges at me. He lunges at me. Let's think about this. So if she's standing in the room, she has a gun in her hand, and he just came in the door, and she's pointing the gun at him. She says he takes a fighting stance. First of all, he's right-handed. Do this yourselves when you get in the back. If someone told you to get in a fighting stance, what would you do? And determine for yourselves. Use your common sense. Which side of you would be?
Look at her. Look at her. She's a boxer now. She's a fighter. I know what a fighting stance is. Like, give me a friggin' do this in the back room. Like, what kind of closing argument is this? I honestly, I didn't think it could get worse than the Commonwealth, but I mean, this is bad. this is bad. This is like telling your kids at recess, let's play pretend, like getting your best Street Fighter stance. Like, this is absolutely ridiculous.
Would be bladed away. I think you'll find that your strong hand is going to be the one that's bladed away. So if he's right-handed, he's in a fighting stance, he's going to be like this. Interesting, because he's shot from this side. So he's like this. And then she says he lunges at me, right? So if he lunges at her, he's head on, straight onto her, lunging. That bullet hole would have been here and out here. Would have gone straight through him, front to back. That is not the way that bullet went. That bullet went side to side.
No, it didn't. No, it didn't.
And if he's in a fighting stance and he's right-handed, why would he have this side towards her? And Mr. Haig, the expert, the firearms expert, displayed when I said, okay, I'm going to point a gun at you. You show me where your body would have to be in order to get that trajectory. And he turned sideways. So his body in his fighting stance would have to be completely sideways. And what, he's skipping to her to lunge? I mean,
I feel like this is her like trying out for the mock trial team in high school.
Is that trajectory going to happen based on what she said? More than likely, the hands that were up was a defensive stance. He probably came into the room and said, whoa, she's got a gun, and started to turn around.
There's so much speculation with this. So I'm not going to keep playing it because, again, I did the whole breakdown, but they're pretty much just summarizing, like, yeah, this is what she essentially said. That is just her, once again, trying to manipulate the system. She's trying to manipulate you to believe that this was necessary. He was coming at me, but the physical evidence does not bear that out. It does not show that he was coming at her and that she had to shoot him. So you see too, and this is another argument that they make, which I think is good, is that the prosecution tries to constantly shift the burden to the defense to prove it was self-defense, when really it's not the defense's job to have any burden. That's the prosecution's burden. They have the burden of proof, not the defense. The defense is just to poke holes in the prosecution's theory, which is ever evolving as the days of the trial went on. So then, during the state's rebuttal, I think I can't stand this woman even more than Timu Regina George. During the state's rebuttal closing argument, Cruella DeVille told the jury, buying the house, I read that very differently. First of all, he wasn't trying to buy, he was trying to rent. We'll play this clip in a little bit. This was totally asinine to me. So, like, when they called up, and I didn't do like a breakdown of this testimony because it was really short and sweet, but it was interesting. The defense called Doug's like realtor to the stand because he was looking for a house that was directly behind or within the area of, regardless of whether it was behind or just in the area, the fact that she was pursuing injunctions against this man and trying to get as far away from him as possible. He's looking for a house to buy or rent. That's still creepy and stalker like behavior. Hello, this is the guy who put a tracker under her car, for God's sake. Like, holy smokes. But this is their argument. He wasn't trying to buy it, he was just trying to rent. Yeah, because you know how long it takes to close on a house? It could take months. It could take months to close on a house. It's easier to get your foot in the door with rent. First month's, last month's security. Sometimes you don't even need all that. Sometimes it's just first month and a deposit and you're good to go. You're in the door. You move in whenever you want, ASAP. So that, what if anything, that tells me even more, that screams even more red flags for me. The fact that he was trying to rent instead of buy, that he wasn't looking for a permanent spot, that he didn't need to commit to this because he was going to follow Ashley wherever she was going to go, right? And if you don't believe that they were talking while they had this mutual injunction, they were, I'm sure. Like, I'm sure they were. Okay, Cruella, because you were there. Miss Benefield was lying to him, telling him, and everything in bold again is going directly to what the defense is trying to say is prosecutorial misconduct. Miss Benefield was lying to him, telling him they're going to move to Maryland, live in separate houses, but co-parent, emphasis added. And she was all the while planning with her attorney to have an injunction hearing in a matter of days. That's not really a red flag for me. Sorry, Becky. I'm sure Miss Benefield was speaking. So she uses this a lot. I'm sure. Like that, but that's not evidence, Rebecca. It's not. I'm sure Miss Benefield was speaking to him when it was convenient for her, or because the fact that she shared custody and she has to communicate with him. Otherwise, she'd be violating the custody order. Because how else is she going to coordinate pickups and drop-offs and time sharing when she could get something out of it? What was she getting out of it? That's like the funniest thing too, is like, what is she getting out of all of this? Nothing, because the system failed her. She filed, and as you pointed out, she was getting nowhere in Florida. Nowhere. So what was she possibly getting out? Was Doug Benefield paying her bills? Was he giving her any kind of child support? Not that we know of. He had no money. It only goes with the rest of it. This letter we've heard about that Miss Benefield, which I don't know why she brought up, and a lot of people brought this up too. Sorry, I have like hair on my face. Why she's bringing up this letter that wasn't even admitted into evidence. The judge denied it from coming in. So you're referring to this piece of evidence in your rebuttal, which is supposed to be a direct response to the defense's closing argument. To my understanding, right? Lawyers in my chat, please let me know if I'm incorrect in speaking out of turn with that. But it was always my assumption that a rebuttal, just like a redirect, can only be in response to what is stated by the opposing party during their cross-examination or their closing argument, not introducing, like, it's an opening statement. You're presenting this new evidence or evidence that wasn't even omitted into discovery in the first place. Ugh, pisses me off, guys. This letter we've heard about that Miss Benefield testified to about all these things, it's another effort at manipulation. We don't know when she wrote that letter. We don't know what she put in it because you didn't let her defense team admit it into discovery. Oh my goodness. We don't know if any of it was true. I can write a letter and tell you that I'm the Queen of England. It doesn't make it true. You wish it did, though. Just because I say I wrote it 3 years ago doesn't mean I did. Like, this is like high school mock trial, or like not even mock trial, because I think the kids in the mock trial team would probably sweep the floor with these two prosecutors. I don't know. What do you guys think? This is weak. This is weak. This is weak. This is weak. As a rebuttal, it's just Mean Girl vibes. Even reading it on paper, and I watched it. It was painful to watch. I watched it multiple times. It's painful. And we will watch a quick clip of it in a little bit, but wow. I keep saying manipulation. And the reason is because this defendant attempted to manipulate the system. It didn't work. She attempted to manipulate the experts that you called. That you called. She kind of did. Like, what? This is outrageous to me because of because what we did hear. What did we hear about Dr. Liu? So that was the defense's witness, and Mr. Haig, which was their witness. They talked to the defendant. She told him what she says happened, right? I don't even think she told them the same story she told you based on what they said. And neither are you, Becky. You're making up things left and right. And I love all these clips down here. I wish I could copy and paste them. I would submit to you that those two experts, Mr. Haig was the one you should be depending on, even though he also spoke to Miss Benefield. So clearly got one side of the story or a made up story. As to Dr. Broder, it's like liar, liar, pants fryer. I think you should take some of what Dr. Broder said to her, which was also your witness. Like, this is insane to me. This is insane because even in Karen Reed versus the Commonwealth, like, you didn't see Lally like backtracking like that. Not like obviously like that, saying, well, don't believe everything. Like, he stuck by Trooper Proctor. He did. He said he's a schmuck, but or not in a kinder way of saying that, but he acknowledged to an extent he said some inappropriate things. They were not professional, but his investigation was. So, like, but here, their witnesses, they're going back and saying, don't take what they're saying to heart because we don't like what they had to say. We didn't like what they had to Dr. Broder had to say about Ashley Benefield. As to Dr. Broder, I think you could take some of what he said to heart. Her concern was not that Doug was going to fly off at the handle. She said she was concerned she would make him look bad in front of Dr. Broder. Yeah, so she wouldn't get smacked up after the fact. Just my hunch there. I pretended that I'm moving to Maryland and going to co-parent because I don't want to make him look bad. This man that I would have you believe was a abusive, horrible man. I mean, it wasn't just her saying it. It was Renee too. The deceased wife speaking from the grave. Like, I don't know what else to tell you. I wish we could have called, and if there is a round two, Neil Taylor, if you're watching this, I would see if you can dig up some of his other partners too. What about that first wife? Because Ashley was wife number 3. So what about his first wife? What did she have to say? What about other people in his life? Where was his buddy who married them? Was he ever called as a witness? I don't know. And that's not to say anything because, like, people who have violent tendencies, people who are aggressors and abusers, they are usually very good at hiding it from everybody else. Everybody else, they're Mr. Perfect. Everybody else, they're the great guy, how charming, handsome, brilliant, smart, wealthy. They're this power couple, right? This it couple. Stephanie Murphy coined the two. So, yeah, of course he's going to look good to everybody else. But I'd be curious to hear about the other women in his life, or more even about his experiences in the Navy too. These are the questions I would ask. Who else in his past could give us an honest view, at least from a female perspective, of what he was like? They have defamed him, which is strong. It's evidence. There's police reports. There's stuff in these court documents. Documented evidence. No, she didn't say that. She didn't say I was afraid that Doug would freak out on me. I was afraid he'd do this. So she said I didn't want to make him look bad. She's manipulating Dr. Broder, right? She's manipulating Doug for sure. I mean, did Stephanie Murphy write this? Jeez. Um, it's manipulation. And that's what she does. That's what she's done. The evidence has shown it to you. Okay, counselor. I would submit to you that Ashley Benefield is very smart. She's been working the system, excuse me, or trying to for years. And that's the thing. It's like for me, working the system means like you're successfully just scathing away, like you're skating away, getting away with all this stuff. This is not working the system. This is not working the system at all. She's losing. She's losing the system. How is she working the system where everything is, you pointed out, so obviously before? Doug was the one who ended up getting full medical authority, which was bizarro to me, over the child. He got time sharing with the kid. He got what he wanted. What did Ashley get? She got nothing. She got nothing, not even child support. Nothing. So I don't see that as her working the system or trying to for years. And if I say, "Oh, I'm trying to co-parent with an abuser, that looks good for me. He's an abuser. He shouldn't have my baby. He shouldn't have medical control. He certainly shouldn't have custody, partial custody, or anything else." Just because she said it doesn't mean it's true. Just because you say it, Becky, doesn't mean that what you're spewing out is anything true. And that's because, as I said, she tried to manipulate the system. In South Carolina, ended up being mutual. She tried to manipulate the system in Florida. She got turned down. She tried to terminate his parental rights. The judge gave him custody. She tried to manipulate the experts, as I already talked. And I think in some cases she did. And she's trying to manipulate you. And I think this is a really strong argument from the defense. Because as bad as Suzanne O'Donnell's closing argument was, this is just like like this woman has like venom, like she's seething at the teeth, at the mouth. I have no idea, like why do you hate this woman so much? I mean, even like people have compared, other prosecutors, right? Georgia Cappleman in the Adelson case. You could tell she hates Wendy Adelson. She hates Wendy Adelson. Granted, Wendy Adelson was not the defendant, but even when she cross-examined Charlie Adelson, there was a level of professionalism, right? A level of professionalism. She's not coming after him like that. She's not making up shit on the fly and name calling him, because she don't have to, because she had the evidence. That's what happens. That's the difference when you have a case that should be prosecuted versus a case that is weak AF. And this case was so freaking weak that they have to say, "Oh, she's manipulating everybody." See, because they don't have the evidence. Because you don't call your lead investigator to the stand. Because what? You got something to hide? Ah. These inflammatory attacks on Miss Benefield's character serve no purpose but to inflame the minds of the jurors, and I agree. Such arguments are clearly prohibited. See Guerin versus State. As the court stated in Chambers versus State, permitting this general attack on the defendant's character was error. Prosecutors also ridiculed Miss Benefield's testimony, with Miss Friel stating, so that's Cruella, "You can decide what you think about her testimony. She was a witness like any other." But I would submit to you that that was all manipulation. There were no tears. Oh my God, this was so painful to watch. You use your common sense. If you cry and have to take breaks and you're racking, then you're going to have a swollen face. Your eyes are going to be puffy. You're going to have snot. I don't know what other word to use. She didn't even get a tissue until I can't remember who either the judge, like, this is your rebuttal? This is just such a gross mischaracterization. Somebody who's so tone deaf to what a traumatic experience like this can cause. Sometimes, again, your body will shut down, you'll get numb. Maybe she's taught at this point, I mean, she's had to go through the retelling and telling of the story over and over and over and over again for the last 4 years. with her attorney. So it's like I can understand if, yeah, maybe she's not going to get that Hollywood movie reaction that we're all expecting, but that doesn't make it any less authentic. So this is a dumb argument, so tone deaf. Somebody who clearly is completely out of touch with any type of DV survivor, DV trauma, because it's not all the same. I don't know what other word to use. She didn't even get a tissue until I can't remember who either the judge or the defense attorney told her, hey, there's tissues. Oh, yeah, I should have a tissue. She'd been crying for 15 minutes and didn't need a tissue. That's manipulation. That's her efforts to manipulate you and make you believe that she was a victim. Maybe she didn't know she could reach for a tissue. Ever think about that? Maybe she didn't know she could ask for one, right? She's not the victim. Doug Benefield was the victim in this case. So I want to skip to this part. Here's the part where she's talking about the buying the house and the renting the house, which is also ridiculous.
The house. Buying the house. I read that very differently. First of all, he wasn't trying to buy, he was trying to rent. And if you don't believe that they were talking while they had this mutual injunction,
he wasn't trying to buy, he was trying to rent.
And they're going to move to Ohio, planning with her, have mutual injunction. You could get something out of it. It only goes with the rest of it. This letter we've heard about, that Ms. Benefield testified, all these things, it's another effort at manipulation. We don't know when she wrote that letter. We don't know what she put in it. We don't know if any of it was true. I can write a letter and tell you that I'm the Queen of England. It doesn't make it true.
Girlfriend wishes.
And just because I say I wrote it 3 years ago doesn't mean I did. I keep saying manipulation. And the reason is because this defendant attempted to manipulate the system. It didn't work. She attempted to manipulate the experts. She kind of did, right? Because what did we hear about Dr. Liu and Mr. Haig?
Like, it's not funny, but it's funny because it's just so ridiculous. And when you hear this again and again, it's like, oh my goodness, like this is your best argument. This is your rebuttal. Is that I'm going to discredit our own list of witness experts? I mean, that's why they're there. Again, the Commonwealth Lally didn't even do that with Trooper Paul. He just went along with it. Like, not trying to discredit it, even though the ARCA guys were clearly more qualified to testify about the physics of all of that happening. But I mean, like, Lally, like, he bet on the horse, and that was the horse, and he stuck with it. He stuck with it. He didn't discredit his own witness or attempt to. But here they're like backpedaling because they know it's bad, and it's so bizarre to me. I've never seen this.
The defendant story she told you based on what they said. But what do we know? So Mr. Haig, I will submit to you, I think Mr. Haig was great. I loved it. I thought he was very interesting. I thought he shed a lot of light on how this murder occurred. Right? And I would submit to you that you should believe him over Dr. Liu when it comes to trajectory. He's an expert. No doubt about it. That's what he does all the time.
Even though Dr. Liu has also been a state witness in a number of cases. But okay.
Dr. Liu, the medical examiner. She seems like a well-qualified medical examiner who did testify mostly for the state because she worked for the state and is now testifying for the defense. And the defense asked you, why would she do that? She did that because she's getting paid.
And this like bothered me too. And I think they outlined this as well, the defense, like, because this doesn't bother me. Like, this is like kind of like an unknown, like, yes, they're professional people. Whether she got paid or not paid doesn't necessarily mean that what she's testifying to isn't false, because at the end of the day, one, she's being filmed on TV, right? And it's her credibility. If that's her game and she wants to just take people's money, I'm not saying that doesn't happen. I'm sure it does. But you're also getting paid, Rebecca. You're not just there doing this for fun. You're getting paid. In fact, everybody sitting there, right, who's from Bradenton in Manatee County is paying for you to do this. So you are also there because you are being paid. It's a job. Now, according to the defense, there is no direct claim. There is no proof that Dr. Liu was in fact paid by the defense to give her testimony in this case. I don't have a problem with it regardless, because like I said, These are people, they're professionals. Time is money. If she's not doing this, she could be helping out with a completely different case, maybe even testifying in a different case. Doesn't matter. Regardless, she's getting paid because she generally works for the state. She's a medical examiner. So, I mean, like, this is so dim. This is so dim. Why else would any of you being in there working for the court be there other than you being paid? You're not doing this out of the goodness for your heart. You're not doing this pro bono. You're doing this because you're also getting paid, woman. My God, this is such a tone deaf argument.
As to Dr. Broder, I'm concerned. She was concerned she would make him look bad in front of Dr. Broder. I pretended that I'm moving to Maryland and going to co-parent because I don't want to make him look bad. This man that I would have you believe was a abusive, horrible man. They have defamed him up and down. No, she didn't say that. She didn't say, I was afraid that Doug would freak out on me. I was afraid he'd do this. No, she said, I didn't want to make him look bad. She's manipulating Dr. Broder, right? She's manipulating Doug for sure. She can't say in front of Doug, I'm not moving to Maryland. Because then who's going to move her boxes, right? I can't say in front of Doug, I'm not moving to Maryland with you, because then maybe he won't drop his divorce case. Then maybe he'll try to take my baby, right? She can't let him know that. She can't let him know that until he's packed her up, ready to go. It's manipulation. And that's what she does. That's what she's done. The evidence has shown it to you. And it doesn't matter if it was the report or the injunction. She knew the jig is up. He might seek more control. It probably just went in there. But Stephanie Murphy told you that when they went, and she was trying to get an injunction, and it was denied. And he was very telling, control over the baby on the medical stuff, right? And I wouldn't put anything in the fact that she didn't confess on her phone, that she didn't tell somebody that that she had shot him one way or the other. She didn't even tell her mama. Her mother would have you believe that in all these years, she's never said something to you. You think she's going to put it on her phone? No, she's smarter than that. If that's true, she's certainly not going to put it on her phone. And just because you search up how to co-parent with an abuser doesn't mean that person's an abuser.
I'm doing everything in me to not scream right now. Just because you look up on Google how to co-parent with an abuser doesn't mean that they're an abuser. Why the hell else would you be looking up? In the same way that Karen Reed was looking up defense attorneys for DUIs because she thought she was going to get arrested for driving while under the influence. That's why. Why else would these... Guys, we have so much more of this to go through. We're not going to get through all of it today, but I want to get through the rest of this because this is making my blood boil, and I need
I would submit to you that Ashley Benefield is very smart. She's been working the system or trying for years. And if I say, oh, I'm trying to co-parent with an abuser, that looks good for me. He's an abuser. He shouldn't have my baby. He shouldn't have medical control. He certainly shouldn't have custody, partial custody, or anything else. Just because she said it doesn't mean it's true. And that's because, as I said, she tried to manipulate the system in South Carolina. It ended up being mutual. She tried to manipulate the system in Florida. She got turned down. She tried to terminate his parental rights. The judge gave him custody. She tried to manipulate the experts, as I already talked, and I think in some cases she did. And she's trying to manipulate you. You can decide what you think about her testimony as a witness like any other. But I would submit to you that that was all manipulation. There were no tears.
There we go.
You use your common sense. If you cry and have to take breaks and you're racking, then you're going to have...
This is so disturbing and so disgusting too, because again, this is just proof that this person has absolutely no idea what trauma like this is like. No idea. This isn't the movies. like you want it to be, because I know you're on TV and I know you love it, Cruella. But this is a bad look for you. One, this is a terrible argument. If this is what you have to rebut on, is the fact that she didn't allegedly produce tears, I don't know. I don't care. Like I said before, I do not care if tears came out or not. That doesn't mean that she's being dishonest. We all grieve in different ways. We all experience and relive trauma in different ways. We all process, we all heal in different ways. And yeah, this happened over 4 years ago. And it's the same way, and I'm so sick. I'm so sick of people, and this is where I'm gonna get spicy, guys, because I'm so sick of this. Sick of people constantly dragging women and telling them how they should behave, how they should react and respond to certain things. Just like the damn Karen Reed case, when everybody's like, "Oh, she should be crying and so upset all the time, disheveled looking because John O'Keefe passed away over 2 years ago." And it's like, yes, of course it's sad, but don't you think for a second, going through this trial, the only thing that you're thinking about in that moment is your innocence. You don't have time to actually grieve. And imagine the mixed emotions Ashley is feeling because, one, whether she loved, hated, and or both Doug, which I would suspect probably both. She probably had many feelings about Doug. Fear, love, hate, sadness, all of the above. Happiness, maybe even at times too. Mixed emotions. And you don't know how you're going to respond, especially when you're essentially being interrogated. I mean, that cross-examination felt like an interrogation to me. And fine, you know what? Like, fine, you're doing your thing. I think you could have went about it a little bit better, more delicately. Because what if she is telling the truth? Now you guys look like a bunch of assholes who are insensitive. And for every other person who is in a similar situation, you just totally invalidated them by minimizing their abuse. Because it doesn't fit your criteria of what you believe abuse looks like. Like, what are we in the 1950s? I cannot stand it. There is no right or wrong answer for how you're supposed to respond to trauma. So stop with this bull crap. Racking in tears. I would love to see what you look like when you cry. Just because you're an ugly crier doesn't mean that Ashley's an ugly crier. I'm sorry, but that also feels like kind of a dig at her. And it's like, I don't get why. Because, like, you can tell Suzanne O'Donnell, like, has, I don't know, like, she's got something against Ashley, but for this woman, she is just like, she's like a viper. She is like just so angry. You can tell she does not like Ashley Benefield, and that's fine. I get it. You're trying to prove your case, but why is it so personal for you? Why is it because you're not the beautiful ballerina that Ashley is? Because you're dealing with your own insecurities that you never grew out of, Rebecca? This is just absolutely deplorable and disgusting. And I hate it. I hate it. I'm sorry. I hate it. There is not one size fits all response to trauma and talking about it with people who you know don't like you. And they're going to spin it a million different ways because they'll do anything at all costs to win this damn case. Even if that means protecting an abuser. And I'm not saying that Douglas Benefield deserved to die at all. But to completely minimize what he was and what he did to her, not only just her, but to his deceased wife, is a lie. Is a lie. Own up to it. Own up to who he was.
A swollen face. Your eyes are gonna be puffy. You're gonna have snot. I don't know what other word to use. She didn't even get a tissue until I can't remember who, either the judge or the defense attorney told her, hey, there's tissues. Oh yeah, I should have a tissue. She'd been crying for 15 minutes. Didn't need a tissue.
I don't always use a tissue, by the way, when I cry. A lot of times I'll use my shirt, whatever's available. Also, I have never been filmed in a courtroom crying where you don't exactly know what the rules are. So, I mean, like, come on now. This is like the dumbest argument.
That's manipulation. That's her efforts to manipulate you, to make you believe that she was a victim. She is not the victim. Douglas Benefield was the victim in this case. And reasonable.
So I want to read through just a little bit more of this document. And then next video, we'll go into the rest of the prosecutorial misconduct that the defense is alleging here. So such vituperative characterizations of a defendant are improper and prejudicial, as stated in Gore versus State. A prosecutor cannot engage in vituperative or pejorative characterizations of a defendant or needless sarcasm. Yeah, a lot of, I mean, remember how many times Alan Jackson was like verbally spanked by Bev because of his off, color remarks that he would made, especially about Trooper Proctor during his testimony. I mean, there were a lot of shots that were fired, but I mean, granted, the defense could have totally objected to some of this in the moment, but I don't know if that was part of their plan. Maybe they were taking it all in, looking up these case laws and seeing, okay, like, is there something? Because as I just looked, Neil Taylor went to, even though he's been practicing law in Florida, he did, his law school was in Tennessee. So interesting stuff. But revealing the prosecutor has abandoned any semblance of professionalism. Yeah. I mean, that was high school bullies. They sound like a couple of high school bullies. Exactly. And I wonder what they're referencing to, because that's something that I've said. Not that they're quoting me, of course, but I know a couple of people have said that. Still not enough. The prosecutors went even further and claimed Miss Benefield was lying with no evidentiary support. And that's the thing. You show me evidence, fine. Show me evidence. That's it. Is there any of this two-faced behavior going on? Is there any paper trail of it? Where are her girlfriends? Has she talked to any of her girlfriends from this? Again, like, why wouldn't the prosecution, if she was such a two-faced monster, why wouldn't they call any of her besties who were at that wedding with Doug, right? No character witnesses. Such attacks on the defendant's credibility are improper. As the court cautioned in Pacifico versus State, where the case against the defendant is weak or tenuous, prosecutors' contentions that the defendant is a liar could rarely, if ever, be construed as harmless error. In Rosso versus State, the court held that improper prosecutorial comments will warrant a new trial where the evidence is very close, where a prosecutor refers to testimony or items not in evidence, or where a prosecutor indulges in personal attacks upon an accused, her defense, or counsel. This woof. And we're only on page 7? So we got about 20 more pages to go through this document. Like I said, we're not going to go through the whole document in today's video. If you want me to continue doing a readout of the rest of this document, let me know in the comment section below. That being said, what are your thoughts? Do you think, so far from what we've read, the defense has a compelling argument to potentially get a new trial for Ashley Benefield? Do you think that there is evidence of prosecutorial misconduct? We haven't even gotten to the juror misconduct that is laid out, and it's actually expanded upon in this new trial motion, which we will go over. I know we went through the juror misconduct motion, which was separate, but that's also included in this motion as well too, hence why it's so long. And we still got a few more sections where they're pointing out prosecutorial misconduct. It's just so fascinating to me. It is so fascinating, and with sentencing being in October, I mean, this does allow the court, I feel like, sufficient amount of time to review this and to see. I mean, we haven't even gone through the Judge White motion from the defense, seeing if they could seek a new trial lawyer, trial judge as well too. There were claims about judge misconduct as well too, or judge bias. So what say you? I want to hear your thoughts in the comment section below. And if you enjoyed today's video, make sure you hit that subscribe button, make sure you hit the notification bell so you don't miss the next readout of this document from me, and make sure you hit the like button because that shows the YouTube algorithm that this is newsworthy news. And before I go, I want to give a shout out to Demp Dog again for your donation. Thank you so much for your super thanks. If you guys want to leave a donation for this channel, you can do so by clicking the join button below. I'll also link it in my description box, so you can just click it and it'll take you right to all the different tiers, including some really awesome perks that I'm working on, like behind the scenes outtakes, early release of videos, members only live streams, and so much more. So if you want to be part of this amazing community, make sure you hit that join button, and I will see you in the next one.